back.
Hello, my friends, and welcome back. I'm very excited to introduce today's guest. We have today a very special individual who is doing amazing things in this world, not only for homeschoolers, but for education in general. We have Matt Beaudreau. He is a father to 3 children. He has a wonderful wife, so he's a dad. He is a lifelong educator and has a reputation as a proactive thought leader in the educational and personal development practices. He's a 2-time featured TEDx speaker and was named Corporate Trainer of the Year at Stanford University, having spoken to over 250,000 people. And he is the founder of Apogee Strong Schools and that whole movement. So, Matt, thank you so much for coming on today and talking with me.
Oh, you're the best. Honor is absolutely mine. And we have internet. I'm not having to try to string this together on my porch and have it not upload later. So, no, glad we got to chat again, my friend.
Yeah, so for those of you listening, we actually recorded 2 months ago and the internet didn't pick up any of it. So there we are. Yay for the internet.
It literally went out in the entire town for 2 days, which I didn't know was even a thing. But it was like somebody was digging something and they cut some sort of lines, and so after we tried to record, I ended up going down to the office, and there were hundreds of people outside, and they were just out turning every way. They're like, "Yes, the whole town is down. Yes, the whole town is down." We're like, "Okay, there's
All right.
Yep, all right, that's what we got to
Well,
do."
then here we are. Yeah.
Yep.
Well, let's start because let's talk about your educational background just a little bit,
Yep.
because you were an educator. So
Yes, ma'am.
let's start there.
And I differentiate educator and teacher, but it's semantics. It's a matter of really is a definition of terms kind of thing. I still think I'm a career educator. I just don't work in schools. I did work in schools. I was at Stanford for a while, and went from Stanford to public schools in California. Was a public school teacher, public school administrator, private school teacher, private school administrator. All of those being in what I call the conveyor belt program, and then ultimately going, okay, I don't think this allows for education. It allows me to be a teacher, and I can still make an impact. But man, I can't continue to show up to these places knowing that I believe we should be doing something better for our kids, and I surely can't send my own kids. And so that's what set me on the path of creating a whole heck of a lot of other things.
Well, what were some of the things that you saw as both an educator and an administrator that made you feel like this is not fixable?
I can give you plenty of things anecdotally that I think a lot of people, and again, I always want to preface it with, there are so many good humans who are teaching in these systems. There are so many good humans sending their kids. I am the biggest proponent for you as a human. I want you to make your decisions. I want you to succeed. I want you to be happy and pour into the young people if you're teaching there. Those things are great. So I'm not attacking a human. I'm attacking a system. So there were some things anecdotally that started to remind me of my own upbringing, where I was really good at school, but I remember leaving, going, okay, well now the world wants me to be something else. I'm just really good at school. Wait, I thought being really good at school was supposed to make me really good at life, and this is not the case. I don't know who I am. I don't know how to go provide values. I don't know what to do. And I saw that pattern over and over and over. School was about making people better at school. And so, I worked in kind of gangland, of California, and it's like, okay, well, that young person needs algebra. I'm like, no, they don't. That's not what he needs. He needs to have a support system. He needs to see that he's got this genius that can open up so many possibilities for him, and I want to help him there. It's like, no, he needs algebra. Why? Well, because our funding comes from that, right? So there's no individuality. There's no way to really unleash the genius that is inside each person, because the system depends on the behavioral management system on which it's built. And so my job was really a behavioral management expert. Like, that's what teachers are there for: manage behaviors and get people to eventually pass this test that's going to get our funding. And so that, to me, is not what education should be for. That is not unlocking the unique genius in each person. And then when I started diving into the history of why schools were built the way they're built, It's like, oh, okay, well, everything is kind of corroborated in that way. It's really is it is a human behavior management system. It has nothing to do with child development. And there's no way to take such a unique personal thing like education and make it a uniform across the board. We don't do that with anything else. If I was like, hey, all children need this medication when they're 6, and then this medication when they're 7, and this medication when they're 8, everybody go, whoa, 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 whoa.
Yeah,
I don't know if I want my kid to have that medic. We're doing the same thing. We're prescribing the same thing.
it's true.
Mm-hmm.
So at what point now, how old were your kids when you realized like I want something different for my own children?
That's a great question. My oldest was getting ready to go into what would have been kindergarten. So she was 5,
Mhm.
almost 6 at that point. And so it was right before it was kind of like the decision. She'd gone to a Montessori preschool for a year. And it was at that point where it was like, okay, do we send her into a quote unquote kindergarten? Do we homeschool? Like, what are we going to do?
And then what ultimately made you decide, yeah, let's go ahead and homeschool? And how did your wife feel about it?
Yeah, that's a great question too. So we didn't decide to homeschool right up front. We decided to build a campus that she could go to, and
Interesting.
invite other people to come. Partially because my wife, and this is my fault, she went homeschool. What are you talking about? Where is this coming from? That's not what I wanted to do. I want it right. And so there's a lot of things to learn from this. One, I did not do a good job of communicating all that I was learning, thinking that I was helping her and I wasn't going to stress her out. I was going to figure out all the answers. And then I was going to come to my wife with this big life change and go, but don't worry, I have it figured out. Right. Versus bringing her along in the conversation. Oopsie number one.
Yeah,
Right.
big oopsie.
Giant oopsie. So a big giant learning opportunity for husband Matt right there. Bring your spouses along with you in these conversations. You're not saving anybody. You're just going to cause a bunch of stress. So I should have brought her along. So then when I presented all of the information and I just barfed it at her, I'm like, oh, I've done years worth of research. Let me barf this at you while we're laying down and getting ready to go to sleep, right? Again, oopsie number 2. Um, but as I do that, she goes, oh my gosh, homeschool. She's thinking now I'm going to have to become the teacher. I need to be at home all the time now, and I'm going to be teaching subjects. And that's not what I wanted to do. It's also not what I meant or envisioned
Yeah.
because I don't think school should be brought home either.
Mhm.
Right? There's a difference between homeschooling and home educating. Home educating, we call it parenting too, and we've all done that if we've got kids. So I didn't do a good job of explaining. So her first response was panic,
Mhm.
for sure. And it was like, no, build something. I don't want to homeschool, and I don't want to move somewhere where we have like, let's build something. Then, if we have to build something, and so we started building. We started building a campus in California and inviting other families to come along.
And so initially what did that initial campus look like? Because again, you have a different view of what you want
Mm.
and you want something different for your kids than the traditional
Than that
school
traditional.
atmosphere.
Yeah,
What did it look like initially? Because I imagine it was kind of a hard process.
it's extraordinarily hard because we want to build something that's not like school at all.
Yeah.
Right? It's not this all because what we're fighting against is this religious understanding of what school looks like.
Mhm.
Everybody has an idea. Everybody went to school, so everybody has an idea of what school looks like, and there's a religious attachment to it. Whether people can intellectually get past, hey, this isn't working. People will say, this isn't working. I wish kids did this instead. I wish. People will say those things all day long, but emotionally, they're still very much attached
Mhm.
to it, and there's still a huge fear of going away from that. There's a huge fear of not doing what the crowd is doing. And there's all the perpetuated myths of, socialization in college and prom and all that. I mean, there's just myth after myth, garbage after garbage. And so that was really the uphill battle, was getting people to understand, look, none of that stuff is real. We want to build
Mhm.
a true growth environment that allows for the individuality. So that initial campus was I ended up leasing a little box of a space that was next to a park. And we really focused on what we thought meta skills look like for a human. Now, I'll say we've done a better job on the Apogee side now. We're
Mhm.
upgrading what we think that is, but that's really what it was Socratic conversations for these young people, individualized academia, um, projects solving real world problems and creating things that mattered. the ability to dive a little bit into some passion projects, and a lot of responsibility on campus. I mean, that's really what it was,
Mhm.
and it really grew from there. And when I say grew, I mean within 5 years, we had three full campuses in
Wow.
California and wait lists for all of them, and really could have started building more.
Wow. So what was it considered a private school then in California, or how, or was it a
Yeah.
hybrid or
So that's part of the interesting thing too, right? Is everybody wants to go, okay, well, is it a private school? Is it a homeschool co-op? We want to categorize these things, and I
Mhm.
totally get it. I didn't want to categorize because even as a quote unquote private school in California, you are still saying, please, Governor Newsom, may we? Please, can we stay open during COVID? Please, can we, like all these things? Please,
Yeah.
how much information about my parents would you like? What would you want me to enforce all of these things and then report back to you? You got it. And I don't play those kind of games because I don't think that has anything to do with our kids. So no, we didn't operate as an official private school. We operated very differently from what California says a school is. And so people go, well, then what is it? It's an education center. It's a
Yeah.
resource center for young people. It's a working place. You call it whatever you want, but
Yeah.
it's young people getting educated. That's what it is, bottom line.
I love it. And how what was the age range that you had at that point
We
when you were still in
started
California?
as young as 5. Our oldest that first year was up to like 12, 13, um, which is tough. It's tough to
Mhm.
do that with multiple age groups of that with that big of a range. But yeah, it was like 5 to 12 in that first year.
Gotcha, gotcha. Okay, and so for those listeners who don't know what Socratic discussions are, could you describe that?
Yeah, so people are familiar with Socrates or the work of Socrates. We hear quotes by Socrates, and he didn't actually write anything. I don't believe there was everything we have from him is secondhand.
Mhm.
But he was an educator who was eventually killed for his beliefs. But his beliefs were essentially, I can't teach you anything. I can just make you think.
Hmm.
That's where he came from. So his whole methodology was to ask questions, was to ask you questions about what you believe and why you believe it. It was to point your eyes in a different direction. It was to prompt you in looking at things a little differently, and not in a way that's like, oh, you're always wrong and I'm going to show you something different. But it's, let's see, do you actually think about your own thoughts? That's called critical thinking. And he did that through questioning. And so we have a number of ways to do that with our kids. Sometimes it is just open-ended questions of just, okay, well then why? Okay, well then why that? Okay, tell me more about that. Okay, why that? I mean, you can go open-ended like that. You can also set up scenarios where people have to make hard choices between two equally hard decisions and walk them through that. But again, there's a simplicity in that. Here's choice A, here's choice B. Which one do you choose and why? And usually the answer of this scenario that you create, the quote unquote answer, is somewhere in the middle where it's like, oh, a
Yeah.
little bit of this and a little bit of this. But we're like, no, no, no. You actually have to pick one of them and defend it. And it's because it's just honing your critical thinking skills. It's really getting you to take a look at why you think what you think. That's all. And so it's not, there's no preconceived agenda, from the educator that says, I've got to get you here to this answer because this is the right answer. And there may be right answers, but a lot of times good questions are better than good answers. So we take the role of, let's just ask you the questions and see where you land. And we'll keep prompting until you see where you've earned the right to have an opinion on something, because now you can argue against it better than anybody else.
I love it. Okay, so you did that for a time, and then, and at this point, your kids are in school. At least your
This
oldest
I
is
built.
in the resource center. They're
Yeah,
in
exactly.
with you. Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
Then what shifted? What changed?
Well, we continued to grow. Things were going extraordinarily well, and we were in California. Everything was looking great. We stayed open during the whole COVID debacle, and we actually grew during the COVID debacle. We were serving a lot of families, and um, one of the things that I developed while I was there, I was still seeing uh, young men that I wish had a little more direct mentorship. And that's when I connected with my friend Tim Kennedy to develop what has become this whole Apogee Strong movement. But it started out as just a mentorship program. And I say just, but we had young men from all over the world when we first launched that committed to going through a 12-month process, a 12-month roadmap of developing their leadership capacity. And they were being mentored directly by some of the best men on the planet, and calls every week with, I mean, you name it, CEOs and, billionaire moguls to professional athletes to movie stars to musicians to people you've never heard of, but they're just amazing human beings and amazing men. And so this mentorship program took off, absolutely took off, and became the foundation for everything that we're doing now. That
Hmm.
was the shift.
Wow. Okay, so at this point, you start Apogee Strong.
Mm,
When did it shift to creating Apogee Strong
yeah,
um,
all the
resource centers and
all the
education centers?
campuses we're doing. Yeah,
Yeah.
so it was all these young men started having, things were changing because they were putting in the work, and we were holding their feet to the fire. And the young men that weren't putting in the work, we just asked them to leave, and because we're not interested, uh, not interested in taking people's money if their young person's not gonna go into that. It's a money loser for us as it is with the amount of time we put in there, and that's fine. It's always been about the mission of it.
Yeah.
Uh, but the young men, as they started pouring in, and started seeing all these changes, it was a very organic, natural progression. Dads started going, "Hey, I never learned any of this stuff.
Hmm.
This would have been cool. Do you think you could do that for men? What would that look like now? What would it look like for us? Okay, cool. Let's put this together. Let's see." Within the first few months of that, hundreds of men from all over the world that jumped in, same sort of thing. 12 months of what does it mean to be a good husband, a good father? How do I take control of my finances? How do I take control of my health? How do I dive into my own personal psychology, my time and energy management? How do I dive into the spiritual side, and not just a let's all debate about our spiritual beliefs, but how do I dive in Socratically and question my own spiritual beliefs? How do I steel man those, and really see, why do I believe what I believe? We put this whole roadmap together,
Hmm.
and that just took off, and it was very organic. Went from the young men to the men, went from the men to the women, and they're bringing wives in, and it was like, okay, look, we're really educating the entire family. And this is where it's always needed to go. So let's circle back around to kind of where this started. Let's start building some campuses for young people, K through 12, quote unquote centers, but let's include mom and dad. Let's get the whole family on this educational journey. Let's create the live events around this. Let's have live events, things that are on campus, but have them be able to connect with each other, and all the campuses from around the world. They can all connect, and they connect with all of these great mentors. Let's just bring it all together, man, so that we are really serving the entire family. Yes, you got to pay for it. That's the downside of any kind of privatized, educational, professional development, movement. So we've created two foundations to give out scholarships. We've already gotten to give out, six figures in scholarships to families to get them to be able to work with us. And we're essentially fighting back about what schools could be, should be, would be, by creating a better option.
I love that. But so I think you bring up an interesting point because I know for me when I started studying the history of the system, which was a big eye opener, having been an educator, still
Mhm.
am, and going, oh my gosh, they were they wanted to destroy the family. They wanted to
Yeah.
separate children from their parents so that they could have
Mhm.
control over the children. And that
Yeah.
hasn't ended. And now we're seeing that with the parent revolution and parents fighting to get control of their children back from the education system. So I think kudos and what a beautiful thing to realize that we've got to bring the family back together and
Mhm.
do it on our campuses. So what does a day look like on one of your campuses
Yeah.
for the kids as well as for the parents?
Yeah, it's a great question. So we operate in what we call buckets. We have, and it's essentially these meta skills. Meta skills are the skills that always matter for all time. School tells you that operates in subjects. There's no such thing as subjects. G.K. Chesterton said it best, and he says education has nothing to do with subjects. It has to do with the transfer of a way of life.
Hmm.
So again, home education, parenting, right? Because what do parents do? You are transferring your way of life to your young people.
Yeah.
Simple. So you've been educating them since day one. You are transferring your way of life. Anybody else that you give a nod to, meaning, okay, I'm going to send my kids to this school, or I'm going to send them to this campus, or I'm going to send them to this martial arts gym, or I'm going to send them to this church. I'm going to send, you are giving the nod to that person or that organization, transferring its way of life into your kids too. So we're encouraging families to take a look at that. And it's not to create these, the buzzword is echo chambers. No, it has nothing to do with only find people that believe what you believe. No, it's find people that have the same values. That's
Mhm.
really what it's built around, is the value system. We encourage civil disagreement. We encourage that. That's thinking about your thoughts. You should be disagreeing with yourself before you're disagreeing with anybody else too, 100%. But it's the values that we come together around. So on our campus, the campuses are built around those values too. And then the meta skills are the things that everybody actually needs. Being able to communicate with other humans never goes out of style, right? Being physically healthy is a meta skill. You're always going to be in your body. We get back to the basics of what it means to be human, and then we create from there. So on our campus, the young people will have daily Socratic conversations.
Mhm.
So learn the rules of engagement of civil discourse. What does that look like? How do you engage in a great conversation? The content starts to become irrelevant, actually,
Mhm.
because you abide by the rules of a good conversation. And parents are able to volunteer on all of these areas and be a part of this there. But the parents also have a very special role that I'll get to. So we have those Socratic conversations. We dive into a workout of some sort on campus all the
I
time.
love
Whether
that.
that's so we're partnered with Physiology First, who
Mhm.
creates calisthenics-based workouts as well as physiology lessons around that. So like physiology around your breath work and tracking your heart rate and being able to get into VO2 maxes and all that kind of stuff, so that people can learn how much physical health is the precursor to mental health,
Yeah.
right? And so, but some campuses are including like jujitsu or CrossFit. All those are great. Each owner has sovereignty over how he or she runs the campus. So the physical education piece is a bucket. They have academic time, but again, it's individualized academia. They get to set their goals. The parents sign off on those goals and go, "Yep, this works for my young person. This is great." And those goals, meaning I want them to be able to use, academic programs like IXL or Khan Academy that are screen based, or no, I'd rather have them use a textbook, or no, that's great. That's fine.
Mhm.
And then the adults are there helping to tutor each individual and coach each individual through all of that. So they have the academic time. They also have a project time. They operate in again, real world projects, collaborating with one another to create something at the end of a 5 or 6 week period. Right now, our campuses are creating a Renaissance fair, all having to do with what does it mean to live by a code,
Oh, I love that.
and the history of communities getting together around a code or values, and where do those come from, and how do we decide our own code and our own moral code going forward. And they're creating a Renaissance fair around that. And then responsibilities on campus. Everybody's got campus jobs. There's a campus economy, so it mirrors the real world. And as they get older, we want them to get off campus and go run apprenticeships and internships and
Mhm.
things like that too. Very basic, very
I
simple.
love that. So, an average day on one of your campuses, like, what do we look at time wise?
It breaks up all those. So many of the campuses, again, sovereignty on how you do that. So many campuses are running a very similar schedule to what school, quote unquote, school would look like.
Hmm.
Start at 9, maybe it ends at 3, and all these buckets have a specific amount of time with, free time in between and lunchtime in between. But some are operating as close to 24 hours a day as possible. So it's like there's a quote unquote after school program, which is really diving into like the Apogee Young Men's or Apogee Men's program. And then parents are coming at night, because parents, if they're sending their children to our campuses, they're going through, mom's going through Apogee Woman, dad's going through Apogee
I
Man,
love it.
right? And so they're coming together on campus and going, we're moving our own education forward. And we're having live events on campuses and having corporate events on campuses. And we want it to be the educational hub for the community.
I love that. Now, how many Apogee Strong campuses are there right now, and how
Yeah,
many are coming?
we have got about 50 that just launched this fall. We've got another 55, 56 that just finished training, and so they're getting up and running by next fall. So we've got a little over 100 affiliate owners right now,
Mhm.
and then there are another uh, 400 or 500 ish that have expressed interest to go through the next round. And so that's been kind of it's like every few months we'll have 400 or 500 people that'll have applied to get info. We'll bring them through a whole discovery process. Here's who we are. Here's who you have to be. Here's how we operate. Here's how we can help you. If it makes sense, great. There's no sales pitch on our side. It's like, look, if you need to do this for your community, here's how we help. And this is what it looks like on our side. If that fits for you, awesome. Let's rock and roll. If it doesn't, that's great. We wish you well. And so we'll likely have another 50 to 60 that we'll bring through. So we're on pace. We'll end up doing about 100 a year, I think, for the next few years.
Wow, wow, wow. Now, oops, oops. Sorry, something popped up on my screen
Oh,
and
good.
I can't see anything.
Oh no, I didn't see it.
Okay, so as far as like boy girl ratios, because I was telling a friend about your campuses, and she said, and one of her, she's got boys, and she's like, oh, I wish there was. She goes, it sounds like this is predominantly for boys, although I'm sure girls go through it. And I said, that's what it sounds like, because I personally feel like we have done a great injustice not only to our girls but especially to our boys in the public school system with how we treat them, with how this everything in the system
Mm-hmm.
is geared to, I feel like, destroy them.
Mm-hmm.
What is the ratio of boys to girls for your campuses roughly?
It depends on the community and who's willing to jump in. There's no reason girls should not be going to these. This is not a boys only
Yeah.
campus, right? We think, yes, young men are impacted likely more than girls are in our current conveyor belt models, because they tend to want to be more physically active, and they're getting put down. They're the ones that are being medicated more often, and so they are being impacted more of that. But it's not like our girls are not being impacted. It's not like schools are built because they're built for girls. It's still
Right,
not
right.
built around education. So this it's like saying, is a jiu-jitsu, a martial arts gym, is that only for boys? Well, no, of course not. Girls can get in there too. And this is the same thing. We want our girls to be wildly educated and doing real things that matter, and not wasting their time on playing the school game that doesn't transfer into the life game. So really depends on the community. Parents tend to be more brave with their boys, which is kind of funny to me. It's interesting because, again, what we're talking about is fear. People fear leaving the system that is completely corrupt against them. Doesn't matter. If you get shown, if I was like, okay, Janae, I've learned about the church that you've grown up in your whole life, and now that you're 30, Janae, I'm gonna take a look, and I'm gonna tell you about all these things that have been going on in your church that you've grown up in. But here's what God actually says. You've been in this cult the whole time. You may go, oh my gosh, I see it. Logically, I see it. I totally see it. Okay, all right, I'm gonna go ahead and step over here. But you're still gonna want to go do cult things because it's so dang ingrained. That's where we're at in the education system, where people think, okay, well, it's probably okay for girls. No, it's not okay it's not meant for
Right.
people, period.
Right.
Period. So this is, again, full family, boys and girls.
I love it. Okay, so with your own kids, because you have
Mm.
since left California,
Yes, ma'am.
moved to rural North Carolina,
Yes, ma'am.
where there is not an Apogee Strong
Correct.
campus. So
Correct.
talk a little bit about your own family and what you and your wife do now with your kids.
Yeah, yeah, so true. So we bought a farm in the mountains of North Carolina, and so because there is not a campus around here that I've built, my kids have been home educated since we moved, and they will stay that way until maybe somebody applies and opens an Apogee, campus close to us, and then they'll have the opportunity to go there. Until then, no, we're doing this. They, I. I don't want to paint the picture of, oh, we're the perfect family, the perfect parents, and the perfect. I've already at least tried to give a little bit of insight into. I'm a knucklehead, and I'm a knucklehead more often than not. I screw up all the time. There's no such thing as a perfect parent, no such thing as a perfect family, but the pursuit of perfection is still an okay standard.
Mhm.
I don't think that's a bad thing to still hold. We still look at, okay, where are we screwing this up, and how can we make these things better? Man, I got to tell you, my kids, not perfect children, but there's something to be said for a 13-year-old, 11-year-old, and an 8-year-old where just last week, the 13-year-old, she works 30 to 40 hours a week. She works out on a ranch. She helps teach lessons around horses. She does riding of her own. She conducts her own academia. She's got a ton of chores and jobs and responsibilities here on the farm that are just hers. She just finished her second book that she wrote, that's
Wow.
350, 400 some odd pages. She reads, 1 to 2 books a week. Um, I mean, and the ranch, but most importantly, the ranch owner comes up to me and she's like, I've got so many people that work here on the farm, that are young people, 18, 19, 20. Your daughter's 13. She works circles around all of them. I want her before I want any of them on anything that we have to do.
Hmm.
Her work ethic is unmatched and her attitude. She shows up here and she's can converse with everybody and she's in a great mood and just here we go. That to me means everything. And then the same week, my 11-year-old, same thing, chores around the farm. But her thing isn't horses. Her thing is gymnastics. She's on a competition gymnastics team. She gets named captain of the gymnastics team, not because she's the best gymnast on the team. She's not. But the coach says it's her attitude. She comes here every day. She's, works her butt off. And my 8-year-old young man, same thing, man. Ninja warrior and wrestling and kickboxing. And they're the same thing. They're just like, they literally say, I wish every student was like your son. Not because he's the best. It's just his attitude and his work ethic. Jobs around the farm. They're just very wildly responsible young people. They're very internally motivated. They create. They're all creators. They create things. We allow them to get bored. They don't get to dive into distractions. They don't have screen time during the day. No. This you've got your jobs, your responsibilities on campus or on the farm. You've got your academia to take on. You got your projects. You've got your books to read. We're going to have Socratic conversations as a family, and then we'll let you be bored. And then you can go create. And man, they create. It's the best.
I love that. Well, and I think we've done an injustice to kids to always try to entertain them. I saw on Facebook recently a mom posted, she's like, I can't get my son to do anything. All he wants to do is play video games. But I don't want him to be bored. And I'm like, take away the video games and let him be bored.
Bingo,
Like
bingo.
that's
That's
where beauty comes.
bingo. Get rid of them. Like it's not. And it's not to vilify video games, but it is a problem. It is a problem that young men do get stuck. They're designed to be addictive, so get rid of them. Get rid of them until they have the maturity. There's nothing wrong with that. But again, it's the fear of, oh, well, my friends give her, he's going to hear about it's garbage, man. Get rid of those things and let them be bored. Let them figure out how to create. It's okay. They're going to be just fine. In fact, they'll be better than fine if you let them do that.
I love it. So here's a question I have for you because most of my audience, those that are listening, are leaving the school system
Mm,
or they have just left or they're thinking about leaving, but there's still a terror that comes,
mm,
as we talked about when if you were
mm.
to leave a cult and it's
Right.
still very much there. What advice would you give those parents and grandparents? Because I have quite a few grandparents raising grandkids.
Hmm. Identify the fear. Try to get specific on where your fear is. Who are you actually afraid of? It's interesting because I have these conversations with parents every day of the week, and it's an honor to get to do so. I always ask them, what is the fear? I'm afraid I'm going to screw up my kid. Who said you're screwing up your kid? Were you afraid of that before school? Were you afraid of that when they were 3? No. Why not? Well, because you were doing what everybody else was doing, but you were parenting and they were fine. Did you send them to school to learn how to speak? Did you send them to school to learn how to walk? Did you send them to school to learn? You didn't. You just made those things normal in your home. You cheered them on when they failed and you knew they were going to come out the other side and everything was going to be fine. Then all of a sudden you send them to school, which everybody else is doing, and failure becomes a bad word. And now you're afraid to not do what everybody else does. It's your conditioning. So identify what the actual fear is and when that came in. And then you got to start figuring out that education is what we talked about earlier, just a transfer of a way of life. So what does that mean? It means you've got to be the best version of yourself. And that's one of the hardest parts for people to get their mind around. Like you've got to be the best version of yourself. And here's the key to great education. If you will move yourself forward and just bring your children along, again, make that the normal standard of life, they're going to be more than fine. But it's on you. It's on you to do that. So you got to identify those fears, identify where you're not moving forward, and then start to dissect that. And if you need to, go dive into John Taylor Gatto, go dive into, see why the cult was created to be the cult that it is, so that you at least are like, okay, I understand. I don't want to go back to that. I did leave for a reason, but you got to identify what the fear is around that terror, because it doesn't need to be there. As long as you're moving yourself forward. If you're the type of adult or type of parent too, that's you want to come home and you want to play video games and you want to just spend hours on TV and you want to sit and just eat Cheetos and you want to, then yeah, you should be afraid, because that's the example that you're giving to your kids. So yes, you should be afraid. But if you're going to get your stuff together and move things forward and just invite them to come along, that's what life's supposed to be, man. That's the kind of adventure we're looking for. They're going to be fine.
I love it. If a family wants to learn about Apogee Strong, where would they go?
ApogeeStrong.com is the way to go. There's a little documentary there that I highly encourage everybody to check out. You can take a look and see all of our verticals that are there, all the different programs that can stand alone. You can find all of the campuses that are near you. We'll have the foundations attached to it if you want to help families to be able to attend this. All of those things can be found on ApogeeStrong.com.
I love it. Any last thoughts for these wonderful parents that are trying to be brave?
You are wonderful parents. That is the thing. You are a wonderful parent. If you care about that young person, and I'm sure you do, you care about that young person more than anybody else does. The best way to perpetuate his or her education is to increase your own and bring them along. Remember that. Remember that education is just a transfer of a way of life, and that you are transferring a desired way of life to them. Anybody else you give a nod to, it gets to transfer their way of life to. If you keep things that simple, you'll find those young people just absolutely over and above any expectation you ever had.
I love it. I love it. Matt, thank you so much for taking the time again to come on. Appreciate it so much. And I'll put in the links, ApogeeStrong.com. It's been a pleasure once again.
Fine.
Mamas and papas, grandmas and grandpas, you're doing better than you think you are, and you've got this. We'll talk next week. If you enjoyed this today, please like and subscribe. You could also join our private Facebook group at School to Homeschool, or sign up for our newsletter at www.schooltohomeschool. Have a great day.